Hi there, welcome back. I'm Renata McElvany, a creativity coach for neurodivergent and multi-passionate women of color. And in this show, we talk about creativity not just as a hobby, but as a tool for self-discovery, healing, joy, and everything in between. But before getting started, I want to invite you to get comfortable, get cozy, grab your favorite drink, or simply take a deep breath and settle in. Let's get into it. So today's episode was inspired by a conversation that I had with my friend Crystal, who is also a multi-passionate neurodivergent creative. And we were talking about the different twists and turns that we've had to take throughout our journey, figuring ourselves out, trying to build businesses that felt right, that were aligned with our true selves, and just like all the different things that we've had to learn along the way. And this conversation was so rich that I was like, I have to talk about this on my podcast because I know that there's other people out there who, like us, wanted to know a lot of things about what it means to be multi-passionate, what it means to be a creative in today's modern world, like how to navigate all these different aspects of ourselves. So I'm thinking of this episode as a love letter to myself, Renata of 3 years ago, who was lost, who was feeling insecure, who didn't think that she could figure out a way to enjoy and merge all her passions into a project that could really work for her. So yeah, these are things that I wish Renata from 3 years ago would have known and understood to make her journey less daunting. So the way that I organized this episode is I divided it into three parts. The first part one is sharing where I was 3 years ago, sort of the mindset, the beliefs that were running my life at that time. Part two is talking about how I discovered that I was neurodivergent and multi-passionate. In part three, I'm talking about where I am today, my approach, and things that I'm doing differently, especially when it comes to my creativity. So if you're currently struggling with navigating your neurodivergent and multifaceted self, you are in the right place. This is going to be the episode for you. So let's dive in. So first of all, let me take you back to where I was 3 years ago. I was so unaware of my multi-passionate and neurodivergent nature. This wasn't even a concept in my head. I was completely unaware of this. I was chasing mainstream ideas of success. So as somebody that went to school for art, I went to school right away. I started working, and it was like a very linear trajectory that I thought that I had to be on. And I was really caught up in the world of commercial creativity, which means illustration, design, and feeling the pressure to stay competitive, to be as relevant as my peers, and wanting to stand out and to be impressive, right? I really feel that I didn't even realize that I was competing in a way, even though I've always prided myself with being someone that doesn't really care about following trends or following what other people want her to do. I did still feel a pressure to keep up with expectations. I was also struggling to choose between design, illustration, coaching, and I didn't know that you could combine these things to make them work. I felt like I had to choose one or the other. And I almost saw everything as very linear, very rigid. And this is going to be a theme that you're going to hear me talking over and over about, because I think this is just the natural result of how we're raised, how we are brought up to think about creativity, about careers, about everything. So I thought to myself, like, first I'm gonna be a designer, and then once I master that, then I'll do something else, and then something else. And it was very like, I have to do this one thing and then get really, really good at it, like achieve mastery status, and then I can give myself permission to do something else. So that was kind of like my mindset at that time. And I also remember feeling like I couldn't find the right help that I needed, because I didn't even know what my problem was, because I just thought that I needed to find a different job. I actually was working a day job where I didn't really feel like it was in alignment. I felt very bored and understimulated. And I thought that my business was gonna be the thing that was gonna solve all my problems. I have always been someone that that has known that I wanted to create my own business. I wanted to build my own thing, do things on my terms, because I saw that as the way to freedom, the way to feel fulfilled. And I I knew that I wanted to do that. And so I always felt like my day job was getting in the way of my dreams. I felt like my day job was a distraction, it was a waste of my time, and I didn't like having to work a day job. My idea was like at some point I'm going to be able to quit my job and do my business full time. And when I do that, everything's going to be roses, everything's going to be great. I'm never going to have to worry about anything else. And the truth is that that puts so much freaking pressure on me. I felt so much pressure to succeed because I didn't I long story short, I ended up quitting my job and I had all this freedom now, and I was like, okay, great, like now I can do whatever I want. And so that's when I realized, like, oh shit, I really have to deliver the results. I have to know what I'm doing. I have to make money. I have to pay the bills. And so that was so much pressure that I had on myself. And that's when I realized that for me, it was really important that I had time and space to kind of think through what I wanted to build and not feel this pressure to achieve success in the traditional way. So it was challenging, it was hard, and that was like one of the first lessons that I want to share with you, that sometimes we feel like we have to take this drastic action, this drastic decision to make a change in our lives, but often this can be very overwhelming and it can create pressure that you don't want to have. So it's not always something that I recommend people do, especially when it comes to like their finances and life. It's important that you feel safe and that you feel like you can make choices without feeling pressure. And so quitting your job without a plan is not advisable. Although I did it, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody else because it is hard, it is challenging, and especially in this economy, I feel like it can put you in a really risky place. So some of the things that I'm kind of reflecting on today is that back then I didn't really have all the pieces to the puzzle yet. I wasn't aware of all these different aspects of myself. And so I couldn't really figure things out. Like I couldn't understand myself fully at that time. And it was okay. I just felt like I had to rush and I had to figure it out. And this is another thing that will come up, I'm sure, as we go through the episode, but it's something that I had to go through over and over to really understand. And I also feel like even at that time, even though I didn't know that I was neurodivergent and multi-passionate, one thing that I was very clear about was that I was not meant to be on the traditional path, on the mainstream path to success, because it wasn't working. I was already trying to do that and it was feeling like a lot and it wasn't fun or enjoyable. And so if you are at this stage, I will really encourage you to give yourself time to explore, give yourself time and space to explore who you are and what you care about. Because like I said, as you were seeing in my story, I went from going to school to working full time and never really giving myself space to explore without feeling like I had to deliver results. The other thing that I think is really helpful is to get very clear on your values, get clear about what's important to you, and notice everything that you're interested in without judging yourself, without putting pressure to have to act on it, because I think this is going to help you in the long term. And something that I talk about with friends is that people like us, we tend to go in cycles, we tend to go in circles. Instead of going in a linear path, we go in circles, learning about different things that we're into. And so the thing that you think, I was into it right now, I think I got bored, you might come back to it later. So I think it's helpful to make notes or to document your process and just leave it there and like let it exist and come back to it when you are into it again. Because I feel like sometimes we kill our passions because we feel like we don't see how they're going to tie back together, how they're going to become a thing. And so I just really want to encourage you not to judge yourself, not to put that pressure to figure out how it's going to work out. Okay, so now let's move on to part 2. And this is where I started to explore, shift, and experiment. And I see this as my growth phase. And at this stage, like I said, I had quit my job. I felt a lot of openness and excitement because I saw that this was my moment to thrive, and I felt there were many options for me, but also I felt overwhelmed, and I felt a huge pressure to succeed because I had to pay the bills. I had to deliver results, and I hadn't really thought that through, or I just didn't really see that before I had made the decision to quit my job. And so at this time, I was also really tired of doing the art thing. And what do I mean by this? This is more of the season when I was thinking of myself as an artist, taking that traditional path that artists take, where, like I said before, it was a very linear path where I had gone to school to study art, I was working, and now I had to build my reputation and have a roster of famous and important clients. When I got to this stage, I was like, you know what? This is really getting exhausting. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm just going to take a break. I don't know where this is going to go in the future, but right now I feel like I need to take a pause. And at that moment, I felt like I was a bit of a failure, a lot of a failure actually, because in my mind, I felt like I had failed. I had failed at trying to live the life of a full-time artist, a successful full-time artist. And even though I felt like a failure, I'm really proud of myself because at that time I decided to instead put my energy to exploring things that I was interested in. Things like personal growth, self discovery, learning about personality types, psychology, healing, writing. As you can see, this is kind of reflected in my podcast now and like the work that I'm doing in coaching. But yeah, at that time, I hadn't really given myself that space to explore freely. So this was a really exciting time. And during that time, I was also learning about how to tune into my intuition and how to like pay attention to my energy levels, my true capacity. And this was life changing information. And then I just started to explore creating freely without having pressure to turn it into something else. I really went even deeper with this idea of like just having fun. And here's where things shifted because at this time, since I was taking all these different classes, I ended up taking a class with a beautiful person that I love and I admire. And she's a great mentor of mine, Lauren Sapala. She teaches about INFJ, creativity, and everything related to being intuitive and all kinds of different things. And in one of her classes, she talked about neurodivergence and being multi-passionate. And when she started describing all the different characteristics about these personality types, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like, that's literally me. Holy shit. I had no idea. And it blew my mind. And it changed the trajectory that I was going to go on for the rest of my life. Up until this point, of course, like I still haven't lived my entire life, but you know what I mean? Like, it shifted everything. And it took a while to really let that sink in, really integrate that knowledge, because before you can do that, you have to kind of reassess your whole life, reflect on how you've been living without this knowledge. And so that's why for me, that was such a freaking powerful moment, a life-changing moment that, yeah, it took me on a completely different trajectory that I did not expect. And it was because I gave myself time to explore, because I gave myself time to dive into the things that I'm passionate about. And that was the gift of that exploration, realizing more things about myself, having more data, more information to make better decisions that were better aligned to who I truly am, not what society expected me to be. So some of the things that I've been reflecting on is just that sometimes it's necessary to burn everything to the ground and start fresh and reinvent ourselves. I also feel like discovering that I was neurodivergent, multi-passionate, and even low energy completely shifted the way that I approach my life and creativity. And it took time to integrate this into my life, like I said before. And I think that it also means that sometimes when we're thinking about living more authentically, what that really means is having to unlearn and slow down enough to notice the things about yourself that you want, that you like, that you need. So it's less about adding more and more information to your brain, and it's more about just asking questions, reflecting, just sitting with yourself and noticing what matters to you. If you are at this stage, here are some things that I wish I knew then. And one is that I think it's really critical that we give ourselves permission to quit or step back from doing the same thing over and over. If you've been on a trajectory of doing the same thing, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling burnt out, I say give yourself the permission to stop. And you don't have to make it permanent, but definitely taking a pause, taking a break is going to be super helpful. I can't recommend this enough. Also, use your break as a space to connect with yourself, to learn for fun. Don't feel like you have to have things figured out or learn how to monetize everything. Just have fun. Now, let's move on to part 3. And this is the part where I started to practice surrendering, radical acceptance, and working with my intuition. I see this as the season where I started to integrate, align, and really ground. And so after years of struggling with lack of clarity, I started to truly align with my true nature. And this meant letting go of rigid planning, getting out of my head, and working with my intuition, listening to my heart. And I also noticed that I started to surrender to life, learning to go with the flow, you could say, and just being more flexible, which is not something that I was really used to. This is not, doesn't come naturally to me. And I say this because previous to this moment where I am today, I used to be the type of person who wanted her life to be perfect. I wanted to fix all my problems. I wanted to figure everything out. And this is so much pressure. This is so overwhelming. And there's so much weight that you put on yourself when you think like this. But that was me. And what that did is that I felt like I always had to be doing something. I always had to be achieving. I always had to be helping. I couldn't slow down. I didn't want to take breaks. I thought it was gonna keep me from being successful. And so those were some of the limiting beliefs that I carried for so long up until today, where I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm more in tune with my heart, now that I've slowed down, now that I've done like the most unthinkable thing, which was take a break and step back from creating art publicly, now that I've done all these things, I can actually just enjoy my life and exist and not have to achieve anything. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. So I'm just going to have fun. And that has made all the difference. That has allowed me to truly enjoy the fruits of my labor, you could say, because I've been working so hard for so long that I just hadn't made time to enjoy what I was already achieving and what I had already done in my life. The other thing that I did is that I started to define success on my own terms. And the thing that I realized when I started to do this is that I noticed that I was already successful in many different ways. For me, success means being able to be creative 24/7 every day. And I do that already. So I was like, why am I waiting for something else to happen? Like I'm already doing that today. The other thing that I see as part of success is being able to work with my natural rhythms, my natural energy levels. And that's also something that I've started to do because once I found out about being multi-passionate, neurodivergent, there was no way that I wasn't going to build a life around those aspects of myself because I was done with going against the grain. I wanted to make things easier on myself, you know? And I think that's a real lesson right there for many of us. What if it was easy? What if we could just flow and it wasn't hard? I think so many of us want to grab onto something that feels hard because that means that we care more or that we're more committed. But truly, I question that. I want you to question that if that's something that you're thinking about because it isn't always true. So one of the things that I have been doing in this new stage of my life that I'm really enjoying, and I talk about it whenever I get the chance, is that I started this project where I started to create ugly art on purpose because this had been one of my biggest fears for the longest time. Forever, I would start to create drawings or paintings and I would hold myself back because I didn't perceive them to be perfect and or what I imagined in my head. And I think this is a problem that many creative people have, and people who are very idealistic. We have really clear ideas of what we want to achieve in the real world, in the physical world, that are coming from our imagination, our mind, and we just can't seem to get it on the page. And when that doesn't happen, it feels really frustrating, and we blame ourselves and we think, I must be doing something wrong. We have this tendency to internalize failures. So I was like, you know what? I want to work through that. I just want to sit with the feeling of doing something ugly and letting it be. I just want to get used to the discomfort that comes from doing something the wrong way or in an ugly way. And that it's its own form of healing, I have to say. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. And the more that I did that, the more that I started to play. I even brought in materials that I hadn't really been working with, because typically I would think of those as childish and things that kids play with. For example, finger paints, glitter, cutting and pasting and making ugly marks, and feeling totally okay with it. It was so liberating. That's the best word that I can think of. So if you are feeling similar to me, I really highly recommend taking on something like this, doing a project like this, because it's very liberating. It just gives you that playfulness back that many of us have felt disconnected from. And ever since, I've noticed my ability to just let my work be, not going over and over and over again trying to make it perfect. Highly recommend. Now that I'm in this new stage of my life, I think that one of the reflections that I've had in the last few months is that I stopped trying to fix everything and constantly improving and healing. And that has allowed me to have more room to simply exist and just be. I also realized that I was able to start to do things that I always wanted to do, but I just couldn't find the energy or the courage or whatever it was to do them. And a great example of this is my podcast, which is something that I had been thinking about, and I was feeling unsure and like doubtful, like I think a lot of us are when we want to start something new. And I just started doing it. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to wait to be perfect. I don't have to wait to not be afraid before I take steps to move forward. And what I realized is that the confidence that we're looking for, you can find it when you start to do the thing, when you start to take action. It's after you take action that you learn what works and you start to feel more confident, and it feels so good. But it's only after you take the action. And this is one of the biggest lessons that I want to pass on to you, that you don't have to feel confident before you do something. You don't have to wait until there's no more fears and now you're completely ready, right? You can start where you are, afraid and a bit shy, whatever. Like, we want to see your personality out here in the world. We want to see your art. We want you to contribute, and you're perfect as you are in this moment. You don't have to fix anything, and you can just be. If you're at this stage, here are some things that I wish I knew then that I'm passing down to you. And one of those things is to realize that you can actually find success on your own terms, in alignment with your energy levels. You don't have to stay competitive. You don't have to do something that doesn't feel right in your body. You can find success on your own terms. The other thing is to realize that nothing is really black and white. There's a lot of fun when you explore the in between, the gray area. And most importantly, I think that there is a power, a quiet power in radical acceptance and surrender. And what I mean is that sometimes we need less noise, less pressure, less information, and just being present in our lives, being here, existing, just living is exactly what we need. And we don't need to be trying to change everything. And that's not to say that you have to just stay complacent and like not do anything in your life. But what I mean is that most of us who are listening to this show put way too much pressure on ourselves, and it's okay to take it down a notch. You don't have to do the most. We are now nearing the end of the episode, and I hope that if you take away anything from today's show, is this: it's going to take some time to unpack your own flavor of neurodivergent and multi-passionate creativity. But this process, this is where you will do the growth and the self-discovery that you are looking for. And two is that you can do everything, just not all at the same time. And that's a big distinction that is something I wish that I had really understood, that it's okay to have different interests, that it's okay to explore and just have fun with things, and that not everything has to become a final product. And finally, you don't need permission to do what you want. So give yourself the chance to try the things that make you happy, that bring you joy. Now, I want to hear from you. I want to know, what is one thing that you want to explore to better align yourself with your true nature as a neurodivergent and multi-passionate person? Share in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. I would love to see where you're at, to hear how you're navigating things, because I'm always learning and I always like to hear how other folks are finding this journey. That's it for today's episode. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with a fellow multi-passionate woman of color that you know who needs to be reassured that building a life on her terms is totally possible. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. This is where I share personal reflections, creative prompts, and any upcoming offerings. You can find the link in the show's description. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you on the next one. Until then, stay creative. Bye.